sorry, an IT3.
Okay, so were you leading change as an IT3? Is that pretty common for IT3s to be leading departmental and organizational change?
Well, I certainly wouldn't put it up that high. As a team lead, that is the correct statement, is a team lead as an IT3, and you're in charge of a number of projects. And in this case, from my side, it was a high assurance security project.
So you've said that the Auditor General's figure that she attributed to your companies is incorrect. Is that's fair?
This is what I've been read into, and my staff tells me, yeah.
What you've been read. Did you read the Auditor General's report?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All of it. So I've got lots of comments.
Well, that's great. So by read into, you mean you read it?
Yep.
Okay.
100%.
So you read it and determined that the Auditor General, who is by definition a general with an army of auditors, that should be easy for you to understand based on your experience, that the whole army of auditors was wrong and this one-man army was right. But you've offered a series of assertions in your committee appearances that aren't true. And those have been highlighted by members of other parties and my colleagues. Even just today, you said that you're a member of the Conservative Party, and that's not true. You haven't been a member of the Conservative Party since 2021, and so that's
okay.
That's okay.
That's
fine.
Okay. Order.
That's fine.
Order.
That's
order.
fine.
Order.
We know how to.
Just 1 second.
We know how to.
Just 1 second. I'm going to stop the clock. That is a prop, and it's not allowed. Second, that is a donor card, and it's not a membership card. We all get them to try to get money. Mr. Barrett, you have a minute and a half.
Okay. So it's a donor card. So okay. What you're offering is, again, not an honest representation of what you're doing. And I know you thought it was going to be a great gotcha moment, but it demonstrated that you're not being truthful, sir. And so when it comes down to you not knowing the difference between being a member of a party and whether or not you've made a donation to a party, should we really trust your assessment on whether or not the Auditor General of Canada is wrong in the amount of business that you have done with the Government of Canada? I'm inclined to trust the Auditor General, just like I know that I can trust membership services, that they knew that whatever it was that you were going to hold up wasn't going to be what you said it was. So, while your misrepresentations vary, that's just another great example that we can't trust what you've said to be true, and it gives rise to more questions than it does answers. I'll cede my time back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Jauhari, you have well, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Jauhari. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be here once again. And Mr. Yeo, I'd like to go back to the ArriveCAN. Can you kindly tell me how did the contract for ArriveCAN came to Dalian?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, my understanding is that we never had an ArriveCAN contract, but this was all through staff augmentation contracts that were competitively awarded to Dalian on behalf of CBSA. So okay. My understanding is that it was staff aug contracts, yeah.
Okay, so the staff augmentation contract that was awarded to Dalian on CBSA, how did that come about?
So again, I'm buried 2 gates deep at D&D, and I don't have the exact aspects of how that actually transpired, but I could ask our staff. And
yeah, I would appreciate if you could provide that to the committee. Sure. Sir, you've indicated that the amount of the contract was $4.9 million. The amount of staff augmentation was $4.9 million over 2 years for 20 employees at 100 hours, and you call that a part-time, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if my math holds, and at 1.6 divided by 20 divided by 100, you are charging about $815 an hour, whereas GC strategy for ArriveCAN was charging in the 1,200 plus. Can you explain why because if you're, can you tell me what is it that your team and that 20-man team was, 20-person team was doing for CBSA?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly of their specific tasks because of the fact that this goes into staff augmentation, whether it's, you know, the people that went into it was software development, testers, project management, technology architecture, cybersecurity. So once they get over to the CBSA through the staff augmentation contract, it's really up to the technical authority to drive whatever business needs that are happening on that side. But to get to your question about, you know, 20 people on the contract, my understanding and what my staff has provided me is that the bill rates ranged from $540 to $1,000 per day, depending on the service.
Okay, which is pretty much aligned with what Auditor General was talking about as was rate, but that's very different than the rate that GC Strategy was charging. Were you dealing directly with CBSA? Sorry, was Dalian dealing directly with CBSA, or was through another organization or?
Yep, my understanding is that Dalian was the prime contractor for these contracts. So yes, we were dealing directly with CBSA. Yep.
Okay. Can you tell me of the 20 employees that worked on that project, how many of them were Indigenous?
There are 20 IT professional consultants, not employees, but I would have to check with our staff to see if any of them are actually Indigenous.
Okay. Can you tell me of the projects that you have worked with the Government of Canada, how many of them have been, whether as a subcontractor, whether as your employee, how many of them have been Indigenous?
I know there's a number. I know there's a number out there.
Would you know 5, would 10, 20, 50?
This is the challenge we have with Indigenous, you know, our Indigenous culture, right, is that we don't have enough trained technical people coming out of the Indigenous side of things. So
how much
I don't
investment
know the
has
exact
your
number.
company made into training Indigenous people?
So from a training perspective, I would say that we have had experiences with Algonquin College in the past where I've given out an Aboriginal Achievement Award to technical people that have passed the bar at Algonquin, and I've brought them in for a 12-week placement at the company, and then they've either stayed or they
Would it
moved
be fair
along.
to
So,
say
yeah.
that because of your claim of Indigenous status, you're very comfortable taking under the procurement allocation or under set-aside contract, yet your investment, the company of Dalian, into either hiring or training and building capacity within that Indigenous group is non-existent?
You know, see, the PSIB and the PSAB at the time is not in it's not in the spirit of actually, you know, that aspect. It's in the spirit of trying to get access to government contracts and being able to compete against bigger companies. So absolutely, we've done, you know, what we've done in the past with Algonquin and tried to hire Indigenous people, which we have, internal staff and also contractors. But I just don't have the current number of how many Indigenous contractors we have today.
Can you kindly provide that? And thank you, Mr. Chair.
We can, for sure. Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to appreciate that, Mr. Howie, and good. We'll look for that response as well, Mr. Yao. Beginning now our fourth and last round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to pursue this line of misrepresentations, Mr. Yeo. I know Mr. Barrett asked you some questions, and other members have asked you questions, which, in my opinion, really challenge your credibility. Now, both you and the owner of Corodex, Mr. Wood, testified on October 31st, 2023, and both of you were quite emphatic that you are regularly, both businesses are regularly audited by Indigenous Services Canada with respect to the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, and you both have been receiving clean audits. But that was a misrepresentation. It was a lie, because Indigenous Services Canada said all they do with respect to the set-asides that both your companies operate under from time to time is they do pre-audits. They don't do post-audits. Do you agree with that assessment from Indigenous Services Canada?
I would absolutely agree with that. Yes,
Right.
For sure.
But you didn't qualify that to the membership. You didn't qualify that to committee.
Well, it's your policy. I mean, like, I understand that we go through audits, but I think that's a normal course of action for ISC in its entirety.
Well, I
not
think
just
it's
our company.
I think it's a pretty big deal, sir, when you lead the committee to believe that you're running a clean business, that your Indigenous set-asides are legitimate. They're not operating under a phantom scheme. I know you've been heavily criticized by a number of Indigenous organizations that you're running this. In fact, Bottler even made the same allegation. So these are real concerns. And I think you have to be honest with committee members, sir, because although you haven't been sworn to tell the truth, there is a presumption that you will tell the truth at committee. And there are consequences when people do not tell the truth at committee. So we're going to find out ultimately by the end of this summer through Indigenous Services Canada, who's going to audit everything that you have done, as well as Coridex, hopefully for the last 8 years, if not longer, with respect to all the Indigenous set-asides. Because I think Canadians deserve to know whether or not Indigenous Canadians have benefited from this particular government operation. And if they haven't, then, sir, you'll have some questions to answer. So I put that out to you, sir. Now, the other aspect that concerns me is your relationship with the GC Strategies. Is it accurate, sir, that the one and only time that you worked with GC Strategies was on the Bottler task authorization?
That I would have to ask our staff. I'm not exactly sure if there was anything else in relation to working with GC Strategies. So
Okay.
I'd have to ask our staff about that.
Well, let's talk about Bottler for a moment, please. You do know that Christian Firth testified from GC Strategies that not on one occasion, but upwards to 5 occasions, he deliberately and intentionally doctored work experience for both of the Bottler partners. And he claimed it was a mistake. But given my former background as a Crown attorney, all accused persons, all criminals claim they made mistakes. What in fact Mr. Firth did was commit forgery, and it was a fraud on the government. And what concerns me, sir, is that the Globe recently reported that both you, your company Dalian and Coridex, received those doctored resumes, those fraudulent, forged resumes, and you in fact forwarded that on to the government. That was recent news to me and perhaps this committee, because we were all led to believe that it was Christian Firth at GC who delivered that directly to the government. So it really begs the question, sir, if you've only had a limited amount of time with GC Strategies, why would you accept their material at face value? Because now you're implicated as a joint venture, as a party to the offense of fraud and forgery. It's no wonder that the RCMP are currently investigating your company and that of Coridex, and notwithstanding that you haven't been contacted, certainly does not make yourself in the clear. So you talked about quality management systems in place. Why didn't the quality management system catch these fraudulent resumes?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a good question. So, first and foremost, we're as dismayed as the rest of the committee on the findings from GC Strategies. We were definitely not aware of what was going on, below our subcontractor. The contract between us and GC Strategies is exactly that. We have no reference to Bottler in this case, and what information is being provided, by GC Strategies to us. There are aspects that, and I will be honest with you, there's aspects of third-party verification on employment and that sort of thing, but it's not an industry standard. It's not an industry standard that everybody does in the entire, professional services market. So, what we've learned from this is that even though we do our due diligence on security clearances and putting the CVs together and the categories and the grids and staffing that up to CBSA, what we have learned is that we likely need to put a third-party, verification of employment in place that would allow us to smoke this kind of stuff out, and we just weren't aware of it.
Thank you. That is the time. Turning out to Mr. Chen, you have the floor. Mr. Chen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Yeo, you've had a long career. You joined the Canadian Armed